You don't overthink because you're broken. You overthink because something once broke you, and your mind never stopped trying to protect the pieces. There was a time when silence meant danger. A pause in conversation meant rejection. Uncertainty meant pain, and being unprepared meant being unloved. So you began to rehearse everything, every answer, every smile, every scenario. You built a mind so sharp, so fast, so endlessly alert that it became your shelter and your prison. They don't see it, of course. They praise you for being insightful. They admire your depth. But no one knows what it's like to lie awake at 2 a.m. replaying a conversation that ended days ago, or rewriting a text 100 times because it didn't sound right. This isn't about thought. It's about fear disguised as logic. It's about trauma wearing the mask of intelligence. Carl Jung saw this long before neuroscience could prove it. He said the mind constructs walls to avoid what the soul cannot bear. And for people like you, the walls were built with thoughts, endless, spinning thoughts. You call it analyzing. You call it caution. But it's really just armor. Armor against being hurt. Armor against being wrong. Armor against ever again feeling like the child who had no control. But here's the truth that stings. You will never think your way into peace. Because peace doesn't come from solving the problem. It comes from surrendering the need to solve. Overthinking is the mind's way of avoiding the body. The feelings, the chaos, the grief. The ancient ache you tucked away years ago when someone told you your feelings were too much. So you became efficient. You became clever. You became reasonable. And in doing so, you lost the map back home. You don't trust your instincts anymore. You second-guess your joy. You question your desires. You filter every decision through a committee of doubt that never stops arguing in your head. But what if the mind isn't meant to be the master? What if it's only the messenger? And what if your real self, the one you left behind, is still waiting in the silence you avoid? Jung said that wholeness is not achieved by stacking up thoughts like trophies. It is found by descending into the places thought cannot reach. The irrational, the emotional, the broken, the real. And if this feels like it's describing you, it's not a coincidence. It's not just a nice video. It's your unconscious responding to truth. The kind you don't usually say out loud. So stop scrolling for a second. Let the quiet in. Look below. There are others like you, reading this, nodding, hurting, healing. Say something in the comments. Your voice might become the light someone else has been waiting for. And if you feel understood right now, in a way the world rarely gives you, stay. Subscribe. We don't post to go viral. We post to remember who we are. You see, the greatest illusion of the overthinker is that if they think enough, they'll avoid pain. But the irony? Overthinking is pain. It's the slow erosion of self in the name of control. Every time you overanalyze, you abandon the present moment. You exit your body. You mute your intuition. You trade freedom for a false sense of safety. And it works. For a while. Until it doesn't. Until you're standing in a life you've planned perfectly and still feel completely lost. Jung warned that people who live only in the head become strangers to their soul. And when that happens, no achievement feels fulfilling. No love feels safe. No moment feels enough. Because you're not really in the moment. You're watching it from behind the glass of your thoughts. So how do you break free? Not by thinking harder, but by learning to sit with what you usually escape. The discomfort, the uncertainty, the fear that maybe you don't actually know who you are without the thinking. That's the truth you've been avoiding. And that's the truth that could set you free. Because somewhere underneath all the thoughts is a voice that's been trying to speak. Not in logic, not in plans, but in stillness, in longing, in the ache you keep misunderstanding as anxiety. That ache is your soul, begging you to come back home, to feel instead of fix, to be instead of analyze. And no, it won't feel safe at first. It will feel like you're falling, like you're losing control, like everything might collapse. But it's not collapse. It's return. The unraveling isn't the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of a version of you who doesn't need to explain everything to feel worthy of love. The version of you who can walk into a room without rehearsing how to exist in it. The version of you who trusts that presence is more powerful than perfection. And maybe you're not there yet. That's okay. You're here. And here is enough to begin the return. But there's something we haven't talked about yet. Something Jung believed was hiding underneath the overthinking. A darker, deeper truth that explains why no amount of thinking ever feels like enough. That truth is the shadow. And once you see what you've been running from, you'll finally understand why your peace keeps slipping away and how to get it back. Let's go deeper. You've been taught to fix yourself by thinking harder. But the one thing you've never questioned is the thinker, the voice in your head that never stops narrating. The endless questions, the replays, the worries. You believed that was you. But Jung would ask, who is watching the thinker? Who's behind the thoughts? Because underneath every loop of overthinking is not a lack of intelligence, but a wound, a story, a silence too loud to face directly. And if you slow down enough, you might hear it whispering, I'm not safe unless I'm prepared. I'll be rejected if I don't say the right thing. I must earn love by being perfect. I can't trust anyone, not even myself. This is the shadow, not the evil part of you, but the exiled part, the pieces you had to disown just to survive. Jung said the shadow is the person you would rather not be. But until you look at it, it controls you from the dark. Overthinking is one of its disguises, because as long as you're thinking, you're not feeling. As long as you're analyzing, you're not risking. As long as you're intellectualizing, you're not being vulnerable. And that's the trade your shadow made long ago. Hide the parts of you that hurt, and you might be accepted. But here's the cruel trick. You were accepted, yes, but only the version of you that was filtered, polished, edited, not the real you. So now, love feels like a performance. Joy feels suspicious. Rest feels like laziness. And peace feels unreachable. Because the real you, the emotional you, the soft, messy, human you, was never allowed to come out and breathe. That's why you overthink. It's not a defect. It's a defense. But Jung didn't believe we should destroy the shadow. He believed we must integrate it, not fight the overthinking, but understand what it's been protecting. Ask yourself, what am I afraid I'll feel if I stop thinking? What part of me might rise to the surface if I just get quiet? Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's rage. Maybe it's shame. Or maybe it's a younger version of you, still waiting to be seen, still wondering if they're finally allowed to be real. That's the real work. Not controlling your mind, but freeing yourself. Because the overthinking is just smoke, and there's a fire beneath it that's been calling your name for years. Carl Jung didn't say healing was becoming perfect. He said healing was becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't come from clarity. It comes from courage. The courage to sit in the unknown, to say, I don't know, and still feel worthy. To walk into silence without reaching for distraction. To let go of solving and finally feel the thing that you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Maybe you're afraid that if you stop overthinking, you'll fall apart. But what if falling apart is exactly what you need? Because only by breaking can something more honest take shape. Only by letting go can your real self finally arrive. And let's be honest, you're tired. Tired of running simulations in your mind. Tired of holding every conversation like a math problem. Tired of predicting how everyone might respond so you can avoid rejection before it happens. You're tired of trying to control the world so that you can finally feel calm. But real calm, real peace, only comes when you let go of the need to control at all. There's something deeply sacred about finally saying, I don't need to have it all figured out. I don't need to protect myself from every outcome. I don't need to think my way to safety. Because I trust something deeper now. Something beneath the mind. Something older than the fear. And maybe you're not there yet. But maybe you're getting closer. It starts in small moments, noticing when the thoughts get loud. And instead of spiraling, you pause, you breathe, you feel your feet on the ground, you notice your hands, you enter the body you usually abandon. And for 1 second, you don't try to escape, you stay. That's where healing begins. Not in the answer, but in your willingness to stay present with the question. There is no magical phrase to stop overthinking, no perfect mantra to quiet the storm forever. But there is something better. There's a version of you who isn't afraid to feel, who lets emotions rise and fall like waves, who doesn't demand perfection before they allow themselves to rest, who doesn't dissect every moment, but lives inside them. That version is not found in books. It's not unlocked through logic. It's remembered through stillness, born through honesty, nurtured through self-compassion. And yes, sometimes the mind will fight back. It will scream that you're not doing enough, that you're being irresponsible, that something bad might happen if you let go. But you've listened to that voice for years. Where has it led you? Exhaustion, self-doubt, loneliness. The mind is brilliant, but it's not your home. You are not the thoughts. You are the one who hears them. And it's time to come back to the one who's been listening all along. The overthinking will lose its grip, not because you fixed it, but because you stopped feeding it fear. You stopped believing that you need it to survive. And what happens next is something your mind can't plan, something your logic can't explain, something your shadow can't block. It's the return of peace, not as a reward, but as a birthright. But before you reach it, there's one last trap, one last illusion that keeps overthinkers stuck even after they've started healing. A lie so convincing it makes you feel like you're evolving, when really, you're just overthinking healing itself. Let's talk about that next, because if you miss this, you might stay trapped in a more spiritual-looking prison and never even know it. So you've slowed down. You've stopped feeding the mental noise. You've started noticing when you spiral. You've learned to pause, to breathe, to feel. But then it begins again, not with panic, not with fear, but with something disguised as wisdom. You think, I need to understand myself better. I should read another book about healing. Maybe I haven't unlocked the core wound yet. Maybe this feeling means I'm not healed enough. And suddenly, the mind is back at the wheel, not chasing validation this time, but chasing transformation. It looks spiritual. It sounds enlightened, but underneath, it's the same loop. Carl Jung called this the spiritual bypass, where your inner work becomes just another mask, where overthinking doesn't leave, it just changes clothes. You're not analyzing people anymore. You're analyzing your inner child. You're not obsessing over the future. You're obsessing over healing timelines. You're not seeking approval. You're seeking proof that you're doing the work. But it's still avoidance. It's still fear. It's still the shadow, pulling the strings. This is where most people get stuck, because it feels like progress. But it's just a prettier cage. You don't need more tools. You don't need more frameworks. You don't need to track every emotion, label every thought, and build a strategy for every trigger. You need to trust yourself, not the mind, not the identity you crafted around growth, but the deep, wordless presence that lives beneath all of it. That presence knows something the mind never will. That you were never broken. You were just protecting something sacred. And now, you can stop protecting. You can stop treating your mind like a battlefield. You can stop treating healing like a checklist. You can stop turning your own heart into a self-improvement project. Jung didn't say, become your best self. He said, become who you are. And sometimes, who you are isn't clear, structured, or inspiring. Sometimes, who you are is raw, contradictory, and incomplete. And that's okay. Because wholeness isn't symmetry. It's honesty. It's the ability to hold opposites without collapsing. To say, I'm confident and I still doubt myself. I'm healing and I still hurt. I've grown and I'm still growing. I don't know and I'm still enough. That's not weakness. That's integration. And the more you soften into that truth, the less you'll need to explain it. You'll stop needing others to validate it. You'll stop needing the mind to organize it. You'll just live it. Because peace isn't silence. Peace is presence. And presence is not the absence of thought, but the end of being ruled by it. It's being able to notice a thought and let it float by, to feel an emotion and not turn it into a story, to sit with discomfort without scrambling for meaning. When you reach that level of trust, the mind still speaks, but the body no longer flinches. The thought still comes, but you no longer obey it. The fear still whispers, but it no longer becomes a plan. And this, Jung would say, is the beginning of individuation, not the escape from suffering, but the conscious union with it. Not the denial of your darkness, but your willingness to carry it. Because the path to inner peace was never about light alone. It was about wholeness, and wholeness is messy. It's not about being above others. It's not about mastering your triggers. It's about living so truthfully that even your flaws have space to breathe. So if you're still overthinking, still analyzing every word, still replaying every moment, it doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. But now you know. You don't have to follow every thought. You don't have to solve every fear. You don't have to decode every emotion. You can pause. You can listen. You can let it pass. And in that pause, something third will begin to rise. Not another plan, not another breakthrough, but a deeper presence, a stillness that holds you without asking you to change. This is the gift you've been avoiding, the one that can't be earned through effort, only remembered through surrender. It's the peace that doesn't come after fixing yourself. It's the peace that's been waiting underneath the fixing all along. Because the mind can build incredible things. It can write, calculate, strategize. It can analyze pain, detect patterns, even simulate love. But it cannot feel. It cannot rest. It cannot connect. That's the heart's role. And when you let the heart lead, when you stop obeying the storm in your head, you don't become passive. You become whole. You become the one who can hold thought and silence, logic and surrender, intellect and intimacy, without needing to choose between them. That is the person who no longer overthinks, not because they've stopped thinking, but because they've remembered who they are beneath the thoughts. That's what Carl Jung was pointing to. Not a perfect mind, not a perfect self, but a person brave enough to be complete,